Could you imagine being so hollow, so uncaring for others that you not only rejected your own child over their pure existence, but then tried to frame yourself as some sort of victim because, shocker, well-adjusted people started judging you for that? Well, the monster at the center of today's video doesn't have to imagine it, yet, even more worryingly, they're not alone. This is a common theme among anti-trans parents, and I have thoughts. Just a heads up, we will be talking about a number of heavy topics including transmisia, child abuse, suicide, and misgendering. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so I can keep the channel running. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Hi there, my name's Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and it's time to descend into the depraved pit of inhumanity. That is PITT, as in parents with inconvenient truths about trans, a hate movement formed by parents who would rather kill their children than have a happy trans child. They, however, would describe themselves as a, quote, collector of stories by parents whose homes have been invaded by gender ideology, end quote. And I don't think they're talking about the patriarchy or its child torturing expansion, cis-normativity. Because of course they aren't. They're promoting the hateful myth that trans people existing, something that has been a part of recorded history as long as recorded history has been a thing and is so ubiquitous with the human experience that is thought by some historians, such as Dr. David Greenberg, to have existed in a culturally significant way since at least the Paleolithic era, if not earlier, is some newfangled ideology. It's not. It's hardwired into our species as a whole. It's religion and colonialism which are the new ideologies that have attempted to genocide trans people out of existence multiple times in relatively recent history. Yet they failed, since the only way to eradicate trans people is to eradicate humanity as a whole. As long as children are born, some of those children will be trans. That is a simple fact of nature. The last thing I want to point out here is their profile picture containing the name of the group, followed by the slogan, "My child is not your canvas," which I absolutely agree with. They're not my canvas. But they're also not yours, you parasitic fucking creeps. The only person who gets to decide what to do with your child's body in relation to their gender is your child. With children and young teenagers, this involves socially transitioning, so changing names and pronouns. It might also be accompanied by trying out different ways of dressing, but not always. Once they've reached a medically appropriate age, they might be prescribed fully reversible and clinically safe puberty blockers, the very same that were created for and are also used to help cis children suffering a variety of ailments, including psychological distress as seen in instances of early onset or precocious puberty. And once they're old enough to give informed consent, said medical adults may choose to permanently alter their own bodies to better align with how they perceive themselves, reducing gender dysphoria and increasing gender euphoria. That is the current practice with regards to trans children through to adults, working with them to make sure they have the chance to explore who they are and make that decision for themselves. That is the affirming approach, supporting the child in their exploration. But that's not what these parents want. No. They want to be the ones to dictate their child's body, even if said child becomes an adult, forcing them to adhere to a strict binary and cis-normative roles. This is nothing more than projection on part of the anti-trans parent, something known as mirror propaganda, flipping the narrative to accuse a marginalized group of people of doing the thing the bigot themselves is doing. Which brings us rather nicely to today's story, a blog post on the PITT website simply titled, "I'm tired of being judged." Said post reads as quote, "I'm so tired of being judged because my precious son took on a trans identity. It happened at school, where he first learned about transgender and decided the label fit him. Somehow, though, I feel like I'm the one on trial, and it must mean I failed as a parent." End quote. Did you notice the implication here that it is their daughter who should be on trial? I'm guessing to defend the fact that she's the girl she says she is, based on the information she received in simply learning trans people exist. What an absolutely horrific and combative way to view a child-parent relationship. There's no desire to foster understanding here, just outright contempt for the fact that her daughter learned that trans people existed, saw us and our experiences, and immediately saw herself reflected in those experiences. Yet this anti-trans bigot couldn't handle that, writing quote, "When my son first declared he was trans, I went to my best friend of 30 years in tears. I wasn't looking for debate or politics. I was desperate for someone to listen and support me. Instead, I felt judged. She questioned my parenting at a moment when I could barely breathe. She also said we were only friends because of the kids. That stumped me. We had been friends for 10 years before we ever became mothers. I always believed we were lucky that our children were the same age, and not that they were the foundation of our entire relationship. Not long after, we barely talked. She had known my son since he was born. A quirky, energetic, masculine boy. She knew our family, or at least I thought she did." End quote. Ew! Just ew with the fucking gender stereotypes. All this actually tells me is that this bigot's daughter fit within societal norms, yet were deeply dissatisfied with themselves. They weren't, as so many anti-trans conspiracy theorists argue, a failed man who decided to become a woman. No, they performed their part as a boy, yet they felt something was wrong, that doing so either hurt them or simply didn't make them feel alive. That's not to say that her interests have changed. It's quite possible that she's a trans tomboy, but the fact that she was performing a stereotypically masculine role, yet wasn't happy, is a great indicator that this goes a lot deeper, that it wasn't about simply fitting in. And this conclusion is based entirely on the information supplied to us by this post. So kudos to the friend for respecting that and standing up for said girl, when this bigot of a bio donor failed as a parent. It's astonishing to see how this bigot has complete control over the narrative, but the friend is the one coming out in a positive light. Yet they continue, asserting that, quote, "She emailed me recently asking for a favour after not hearing from her for over a year. I found it strange that she would email instead of call. At the end she wrote, 'Sorry for bothering you.' This line lingered. It felt distant and dismissive. I decided to question that statement and also ask why I never hear from her and why she said we were only friends because of the kids. I told her how that had hurt me. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt." End quote. Something smells fishy here. I feel like part of the story has been deliberately concealed, or maybe the role of who approached who has been reversed. Nothing that really matters, but just parts of this, specifically the bit about ending the initial email with "sorry for bothering you," seems a little weird. It's something I'd expect in a spoken conversation, not an email. It's certainly possible, but I just wanted to note that something feels off here. Yet the horror continues, with the bigot writing, quote, "Her reply confirmed what I'd long suspected. She said she felt dismissed because I was adamant that my perspective held the only truth. She said that I'd moved to the right because I would not accept my son's journey. In other words, the problem wasn't just disagreement. It was that I did not adopt the approved viewpoint on trans ideology. I thought she was judging my parenting. Now I realize she was judging my refusal to conform to groupthink." End quote. This woman must be some sort of ultra-pacifist, as those were some soft fucking criticisms. Because what this bigoted monster refers to as groupthink is what the medical community knows as the best way to keep your trans child alive. Fact: only 8% of LGBT+ people who had not experienced attempts to change their gender or sexuality reported having attempted suicide in the last year. That number almost tripled to 23% in those who had experienced someone trying to convince them to change their gender or sexuality. Let me be clear, that is just trying to convince them, so not actively doing something to prevent them from transitioning. Something as simple as that already triples attempted suicide among trans youth, since it signals family rejection. Yet it gets even worse for those who suffer conversion practices, increasing all the way up to 42% for LGBT+ folk in general, and 57% for trans people specifically. Now, I don't know if this parent forced their child into institutionalized conversion practices, but it needs to be noted that denying a child affirmation as a parent, whether it be social, legal, or medical, is a form of conversion effort. That it is not as simple as telling your child that you wish them to change their gender or sexuality. It is the practice of using power to try and force a child to go against their nature, to conform to the wishes of the adults around them, punishing them when they resist, all in an organized effort to force them to change their gender, no matter the deep psychological harm said violence causes. That is what this bigoted abuser was doing, torturing their child, increasing the likelihood that they'll attempt to take their own life. Now, where such efforts fall on that scale, I don't know. It is likely somewhere between 23% and 57%. But wherever it falls, that is not simply bad parenting, it is not merely neglectful. It is outright, demonstrable abuse. In light of this, I would have been so much harsher. I would have openly acknowledged the fact that this isn't merely a rejection of all known medical science, but clear child abuse, that they are torturing the very person they pretend to care about, solely because the way said child acknowledges themselves doesn't align with the arbitrary standards thrust upon said child at birth on the basis of their genitals, which is just fucking creepy. The idea that people have to present and act in a certain way because of what bits they were born with. But it gets worse, with said bigot going on to add that quote, "After everything I have endured over the past 6 years, the fear, the confusion, the sleepless nights and the grief, losing one of my closest friends feels like another betrayal. It's astonishing how this issue can fracture decades-long relationships. It's as if once a child says, 'I'm trans,' everyone else suddenly takes sides. You truly learn who your friends are when your child makes that declaration. I went looking for compassion and found conditions. I needed support and found judgment. When you fight fiercely for your child and try to navigate something overwhelming and complex, that should not cost your dignity or your friendships. End quote. So this bigot sold out their own daughter all because they couldn't get over their fucking prejudice. And now they're trying to act the victim whilst pretending like they did everything for their child. They didn't. They willingly endangered their child's life, psychologically torturing them because of their own fucking ego. All to try and force their daughter to adhere to the arbitrary nature of the genitals they were born with. Body parts 99.99% of all the people their daughter will ever interact with throughout their entire adult life will never see. They didn't fight fiercely to protect their child. They fought recklessly to protect their prejudice, to shut out any possible notion that, hey, maybe they're nothing more than a maliciously ignorant tool who has been taught to hate an innocent group of people because they lack any and all desire to deploy critical thinking. That it can't be the author who's wrong. No, it has to be the entire medical establishment. So of course people take sides on this. What the author did is child abuse. Not sort of child abuse, not child abuse adjacent, just straight up child abuse. Also, isn't it a tad hypocritical? The author of the post is crying non-stop about being judged. And yet, just a minute ago, they were lashing out at this other parent for conforming to groupthink. By, saying that child abuse is bad and maybe the author would do well to remember that their daughter is still their daughter? Here's another bigoted favourite. Rules for thee, but not for me. They clearly believe that they get to outright attack people for trying to protect their child, something they should be doing, but people can't criticise them for abusing said child? What sort of fucked up mentality is that? Right, the sort eroded by bigotry, of course. Yet, as is entirely predictable, the fellow bigots at PITT had nothing but support for the vile child abuser. Reading one of the top comments to get an idea of this hate group, it asserts, quote, "Dear author, you didn't lose a friendship. That person wasn't your friend. Maybe she was at some point, but she stopped, and that was her decision. I'm at the point in my journey where I'm judging people who go along with this madness, and unapologetically so. There are no names they can call me that hurt because I don't respect them. They don't deserve my respect, and I have no problem saying so. I have lost a few friends and several acquaintances. I'm sure I will lose more. So what? Those people have no place in my life. They are the problem, and the best thing to do with a problem is get rid of it." End quote. Right, the friend's the problem. Except, they're not the one abusing their children and then running off to other child abusers seeking validation. That's you lot. And unlike you, we have the statistics to back us up on this. And yet, you think your respect is worth anything? What a sad and detached creep. Yet I find the other top comment particularly funny, with it declaring that, quote, "I've learned with my own children that I will sometimes make very unpopular decisions that I believe are in the kid's best interest. People can either get on board, stay silent, or leave my life. I don't raise my kids by committee, and I don't believe it takes a village. If anyone feels the need to interject their values into my parenting or judge me beyond their initial reaction, then I don't need them as a friend anymore. And yes, I've lost quite a few decades-long friends. I've also made new ones." End quote. Specifically the part where they say, "People can either get on board, stay silent, or leave my life," since, spoiler, their own children, at least those who survive to adulthood and reach independence, will absolutely leave their life, only for these assholes to once again take to forums like these to bitch about no-contact children. These people can't look at their peers who have had that very thing happen to them and realize that they're looking at their own future. Because these freaks have completely destroyed any potential for accountability, they're running on pure prejudice, making them immune to any and all reason, even that relating to the safety of their own child. The thing is, for as much as this commenter claims to have made many new friends, posts like this one make clear that there is an imbalance, that for as shitty as people like the author of this post and these comments have tried to make society, they are not the majority. They are a very spiteful minority. Yet, as good and reassuring as it is to know this, we also can't lose sight of the fact that there are still children in danger, children being tortured as we speak, people being abused in an effort to turn them cisgender, sometimes killing them in the process, by the very people who are meant to protect them. This danger is very real, but it is one we can beat. As much as these monsters have eroded their humanity and compassion for others, they still have love for themselves. And we should absolutely do everything in our power to continue to make life as miserable for them as possible, to make them feel judged and ostracized at every turn, to force them into hiding. Tolerance is a treaty. It only works when both sides honor it, and these monsters have long broken that, not just in targeting innocent strangers, but their own damn children. These assholes do not deserve peace whilst they continue to act on these bigoted beliefs, and it's on us to attach as much risk to said abusive behaviour as possible as we continue to fight for a better society in general. So shine a light on these abusive hate movements, this pit of depravity, and let them fry under the lamp. They gave their children no quarter, so they deserve none in return. And if you are a child who grew up in or is still growing up in such an environment, I just wanted to say that I am deeply sorry for all the toxicity, the violence and the abuse you were or are still being put through. You did nothing to deserve any of this. All you did was remain true to yourself, and for that you were tortured. Things can and will get better, however, as we continue this fight. Bigots might be loud, but they're also weak and cowardly. It's why they're hiding behind anonymity whilst promoting child abuse, because they can't handle being scrutinized. They expect us to be weak, to fall over and cry when they say the slightest thing, only to become enraged like a spoiled brat when that doesn't happen. We've beat them back before, we can do it again. And if you'd like to help us continue to do just that, please consider becoming one of our patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Flynn, Bloombat, Boea, Deborah Goldsmith, Higgins the Seagull, Jackie Sins, Mix Alba, and Peter Cole. And with that, take care, and I'll catch you next time.